Hello everyone and welcome! In a previous episode we looked at how to insert a satellite into a very specific orbit. But often the game gives us reasons to move those satellites into different orbits. It could be a contract that's motivating us to do that. But I actually have created a different motivation because last episode we looked at putting a relay network in and around Minmus. And we created this nice network of 3 satellites, all equally spaced in identical orbits around Minmus that could all communicate with each other. But what if I have 3 satellites that could be relays, but they're just kind of all over the place? And what I would like to do is place them all into an identical configuration to this one. And that's what we're going to be looking at in this episode. How do we get 3 satellites that are completely separated from each other and put them into the exact same configuration we see here? Well, let's get started. So here we have JunkSat-3. It's in an orbit at a pretty high altitude here above Kerbin, and what we want to do, of course, is get it towards the moon. There's the moon over here. If we take a look at our orbit, it's a little bit eccentric, but on the plus side, it has an inclination very close to 0, so that means that our transfer out to the moon, it's in the same plane as the moon's orbit, so our transfer out here is going to be that much more easier. Now, it only has 421 meters per second left. It's spent most of its fuel just getting itself into this orbit right here. And you might be going, oh wow, that's not very much, but we've already put a lot of energy into getting ourselves into the orbit that we see here. We don't need to spend as much fuel to get ourselves from this orbit to and intersect with the moon because of how much energy we already have. So let's set up our moon transfer, and really this is very much the same sort of deal as what you do from low orbit. You grab yourself a maneuver node, add it onto there, you give yourself some prograde to bring your apoapsis out towards the moon's orbit here. Of course, we have to set the moon as a target like that. You can see our close encounter indicators are fairly far apart. It's a little bit harder to predict exactly where it is you need to do it, so expect to play around a little bit more. We're going to grab the maneuver, we're going to move it, we're going to watch those close, oh, they're kind of jumping around a bit. There we go, they're settling down. We want to get them closer together. Now, the thing to notice is as I'm going around, my apoapsis is no longer touching the moon's orbit, but that's because our initial orbit here is eccentric. See, we're getting further and further away from Kerbin. So what we need to do is correct for that by just adding more prograde. So this is going to take a little bit more playing around. It helps to actually right-click on one of these closest approach indicators, actually gives you the closest separation so that you can actually watch that number. See how I'm bringing it down? But all you need to do is keep playing with it. We'll switch over to here. Keep playing with it until you get the encounter that you want. Oh, here we go. There it's coming in. Okay, so we're at this point. We'll focus our view here on the moon. And in and around the moon, we have actually 2 relays. This is the one we're interested, Moon Relay 1. The other one is JunkSat-4. It's the same situation as JunkSat-3. We would like to get it into this orbit with Moon Relay number 1 as well, but this is going to be our more challenging project. So that's going to be for our next video. Right now we need to switch our target to Moon Relay number 1. And again, as before, you want to pay attention when you're going into another body and wanting to get into a specific orbit, which way around you're going. Notice this one is going around in a retrograde direction. You can tell by the highlighted part of the orbit is the trailing part of the orbit as this thing goes around. So we, as we come in, want to come in from Kerbin on this side of the moon so that when we get close to this orbit, we are going to be going in the direction that we want to be, not in the opposite direction. So always make sure you're going to pay attention to that. Let's select our maneuver node here. And let's see, we'll play around a bit with the time. Again, this takes a little bit of playing around, but the goal of all of this is bringing it in closer, is to get your closest approach, your periapsis, to just be touching your target orbit. And again, expect to be playing around with this a little bit more than what you're probably used to with your moon transfer, and always paying attention to which way you're coming around. So for instance, this is our moon escape, so we're coming around this way. This satellite is going around also in this way. It's going, as we look from here, left to right, or right to left on your screen. So that is good. And again, our goal here is to get our periapsis just to touch our orbit here. So let's see, maybe a little bit more prograde. It seems to be doing the ticket. And play around with the time. See if you can do this with as little fuel as you can. Oh, I think I can actually take away a little bit now. Oh, that's getting pretty close right about there. In fact, I think I might just call that one. All right, so unfortunately, if we take a look at our burn here, it's in 1 day and 4 hours. Yeah, if we let's actually go back to our original orbit here and take a look at our maneuver. We're actually going around a whole one more time and then coming around to here. That is unfortunately just kind of the way it works out sometimes when you're in these long period orbits, but there's nothing to it. Let's just get the job done. Keep going. There we go. Flipping it around. Okay, slow down. And one thing to take a look at with this orbit, if you notice, here we are, we're coming in here, and then we're coming around, and then we're exiting, and look how much arc we're getting. We're actually going like a full 180 coming around the moon. You're probably not used to doing that from our normal low orbit transfers out to the moon. And that's because we are intersecting the moon at a much lower speed than what we're used to. So not only was our ejection out here cheaper, but we should expect as well our capture to be cheaper. Well, there's only one way to find out, and that is to get out there. So let's set up our capture here, and we've done this now a few times. We add a maneuver here at periapsis, but now we got to think about things a little bit here. We got to think about what our goals are. We're not just wanting to get into this orbit. That's not it. A couple of episodes ago, we were doing rendezvous around the moon, but that's not what we're interested in either. We don't want to rendezvous with moon relay number 1. What we want to do is end up in this same orbit, but to be a third of an orbit either ahead or behind moon relay number 1. So we're going to do this first by kind of eyeballing this a little bit. So we just give ourselves some retrograde, get our capture. As we give our capture, we want to keep an eye on this close encounter indicator. Now notice it's not moving. And when that is not moving, the reason is because our maneuver node is just a little bit behind this one encounter. We need to get the maneuver node ahead of this encounter indicator so that we are on the same orbit as the rendezvous. And we do that by simply turning this right down and like hopping ahead a second. And we do this until we see a little bit of a jump. There we go. Now we saw that jump. So again, I'm going to give myself some retrograde. Notice how it's going around, going around, going around, going around, going around, going around. Like, that would be a rendezvous. Can I go around anymore? I want to go around as much as I can. That would be another rendezvous. How much further can I go? I don't think I'm going to get it around one more time. No, I'm not. So, let's put it in the rendezvous position. Approximately. Right about there. If I did this burn, I would get very close to coming to the same place as moon relay number 1, but that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is be 1/3 of an orbit, either behind it or ahead of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this, and I'm watching that other indicator, and I'm doing this just with my eyeballs, nothing more than that. And we are looking at, you know, this being, if we imagine taking the orbit here and dividing it into thirds, you know, maybe this would be better if I just took this off. There we go. If I took this yellow orbit here, divided it into thirds, I want this to be 1/3 of the orbit. I'm thinking that's pretty close. So from here to here is about 1/3 of an orbit. So this will get us approximately in the right position. but not exactly. But we'll look at how we can tweak it even better than that. But for now, we got ourselves a burn to perform down here. All right, and 3, 2, 1, and go. We'll switch our view out to here because this is what we're kind of more interested in. Reduce our throttle, watching the maneuver indicator. That's close enough. 0.2 I mean, this was an eyeballing it anyway. All right, so let's take a look at our situation here. So we've just completed our burn. We are in this blue orbit here. Our Moon Relay 1, which we selected as a target, even though we have no intention of rendezvousing with it, is in this yellow orbit here. In fact, let's clean this up a little bit by just making it so we're just seeing this. There we go. Again, what's going to happen, we're going to go around, do an orbit here. We're going to come, by the time we get back to here where this one rendezvous indicator is, Moon Relay number 1 is going to be over here. That's going to be our target's position. We eyeballed this to be about 1/3 of a circle. But we can measure this a little bit more precisely. If I go over down here and click on the maneuver node bar, I get this orbital info. And if I make sure that this is selected as a target and click on the approach info for Moon Relay number 1, I get more information. And the one I really want to look at here is the phase angle. And notice what it's measuring. It's 132.2 degrees. Let's talk about what that means, because what we're going to do next, it's fairly important. If you take our satellite and join it to the center of the moon, make a line like that, and then imagine doing the same thing with Moon Relay number 1, you end up creating an angle here at the center of the moon. That angle is called the phase angle. In this case, our angle is 132.2 degrees. We would like to be 1/3 of an orbit off from Moon Relay number 1. Now, let's think about this. A full circle is 360 degrees, so we divide that by 3, that's 120 degrees. We would like our phase angle to be 120 degrees. We're hoping that this is close to 120 degrees by the time we do one more orbit, but let's see what happens. So we're just going to do a little bit of time warping. And as we do our time warping, what I want you to do is not just watch these satellites go around, but watch this phase angle. Notice right now that the phase angle is on its way down. We are actually catching up to Moon Relay number 1. Why? Well, because we're towards the periapsis of our orbit. We are going fairly quickly compared to Moon Relay number 1, so we are closing that gap, so to speak. But Moon Relay number 1 is in a circular orbit, so its velocity is going to stay pretty much constant. But us, as we gain altitude, are going to continue to slow down. And in fact, if we take a look at the phase angle right now, notice that the phase angle is increasing. We are actually losing, losing our distance as we go around. So right now, this is not looking particularly promising. But don't forget that as we pass apoapsis, we will start to speed up again and start closing this gap once more. Notice the angle is actually switched to negative. Once it gets past 180, it switches to negative, but that's because our target is now behind us, so it uses negative to show us that. Again, negative 120, positive 120 really doesn't matter. So let's get ourselves down really close. We're closing in on our target here. Let's see how we did. Notice this is saying 116.9. So we're about 3 degrees off from our target. That ain't bad, considering all we did was eyeball it. But what we're going to do is we're going to set up a burn here at periapsis to circularize our orbit. And then after that, I'll show you how you can continue to tweak that phase angle if you are so inclined and get it as close to 120 degrees as you want it to be. Actually, it's not really that I'm setting up a circular orbit here that's really important. What's really important is getting that period right. It's been a long time since I put up this Moon Relay number 1, but at the time that I did it, I mentioned that it's really important to give it a period that is easy for you to remember, and I gave this a period of 3 hours. So as I'm performing this burn, it's the period that I'm really looking at. I want to match that 3 hours. Again, we're going to reduce throttle here. I'm watching that period. Okay, I'm going to reduce throttle really far here. And again, take your time. There's no rush. Oh, this is looking like it's going to work for us really well. And we would love it to be 0 minutes and 0 seconds. There we go. Beautiful. We're going to close that. We're going to close that. And we're going to take a look at our situation here. So here we are. Here's our moon relay number 1. We are about a third of an orbit. Again, if we take a look at our phase angle, you can see our phase angle is 117.7 degrees. Not bad, only 2.3 degrees off. What if you're someone like me and you would love that to be perfect? You would love that to be 120 degrees. How do you go about doing that? Well, actually, it's not as hard as you might think. Let's think about this. We're 117.7 degrees ahead, but we would like to be 120 degrees ahead of moon relay number 1. So we need to get ourselves going a little bit faster. Well, how do we get going a little bit faster? Well, if you're this far in this series, you know what you need to do is reduce the altitude of your orbit. So you reduce the altitude of your orbit, of course, by burning retrograde. That will decrease your period, get you going around a little bit more quickly, and then after doing about an orbit, you should find yourself a little bit ahead. You can even do a little bit of math to kind of ballpark how much do you need to reduce your period by. I would like to increase this angle by 2.3 degrees. That's 2.3 degrees out of a whole circle of 360 degrees. So take 2.3 divided by 360 and then multiply that by your period of 3 hours. And you will find that what you need to do is get yourself being about another 69 seconds faster. You want to be 69 seconds ahead, more ahead of where this fella is. Well, all we need to do then, if we put this on period, is reduce our period by 69 seconds. So 69 seconds, that would make this 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 51 seconds. Well, let's put ourselves on retrograde and see if we can do that. Again, you can take your time. 58, 57, 56, 54, 52, 51. There we go. Didn't look like we changed that much, but what we did is we made ourselves a tiny bit faster. So let's put this onto our phase angle and watch our phase angle as we go around. And what we're looking for is getting that right at 120 degrees. 7, 8, 9, and there, come on, 120. Okay, and stop time warping. We're now at 120 degrees. We didn't quite do an orbit. I did mention that math was pretty approximate. But what we want to do now is, now that we're at the right phase angle, we want to get our period right back to where it was before. So we need to increase our period, which means burning in a prograde direction, and get our period back up to 3 hours again. So let's do that quickly while our phase angle is correct. There we go. 3 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. And if we take a look at our target icon, we are 120 degrees out of phase. Let's actually remove our target here a little bit. There we go. Unset that target to clean this up. Let's bring our relays back. Relays, there we go. Again, ignore Junks F4. That's going to be for next episode. The orbits are pretty close to being the same, but well, again, if you're anything like me, you might not be particularly happy with the difference that already does exist. You can see, like, if I zoom in just a little bit, there's a little bit of a difference between the two orbits that you can see at apoapsis and periapsis. And that's because in our fiddling around, we actually made our orbit slightly eccentric. Our apoapsis is 381.58. while our periapsis is 373.15. Again, functionally, it's going to be fine. You're not going to notice, but if you're anything like me, you would sure love that to be a circle. How are we going to make this back to being a circle again while still keeping our period and our phase angle where we want it to be? It turns out that's not particularly very difficult either. We want to bring our apoapsis down, but not change the energy that's in our orbit. We do that by burning in a radial direction. That's either straight towards the moon or straight away from the moon. We want to bring our apoapsis down, so we need to bring this part of our trajectory downwards. While we bring this part of our trajectory down, we'll be bringing the opposite side of our trajectory up. So what we need to do is burn radially towards the planet. That is this teal icon right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that right now, and we're just going to watch our periapsis and apoapsis, but watch also the period. And notice the period isn't changing, but our apoapsis is coming down where our periapsis is going up. Now, as you're doing this, you're also very slowly pulling that periapsis towards you. So you'll get to a point where that periapsis gets right where you are, and then you won't be able to affect things very much. In fact, as it gets close, you'll find that this doesn't work as efficiently as it once was. But notice our period is not changing. That's the important piece of all of this. Okay. And I'm not getting as much action on my apoapsis and periapsis as I would like, but my period is still the same. And if we go over, oh, of course we don't have our target selected anymore. Let's get our target back. Shouldn't have taken that off. Set as a target. Turn that back off. Our phase angle is still the same as well. Now, the more efficient place to have done this burn, let's turn the target back off again, is actually at the midway point between apoapsis and periapsis. But I wanted to do it right away while our phase angle was still correct. Because the closer you get this to being a circle, the closer your velocity will remain to being constant, and the less variability you'll get in that phase angle as you go around. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get myself now to the point where I'm halfway between my apoapsis and periapsis. Again, I'm just eyeballing this right about there. We're going to burn from here radially down, and this is a more efficient place to do it. Now let's see if we can get that eccentricity of our orbit really right down. We want to get the apoapsis and the periapsis very close to being the same. And again, notice we're pulling our apoapsis a little bit too much towards us, so it starts to get to the point where you can't affect things as much as you would like. But if we take a look here, notice how close they have come, all right? And if you want, you can time warp around to the halfway point again, burn this time radially up, because now it's the periapsis that will be ahead of you. So burning out will push the periapsis up while bringing the apoapsis down. Again, notice our period never changed in all of that. If we bring back one last time our target of moon relay number 1 and go to our phase angle has changed a little bit when we did that, but we can keep doing the same sort of tricks until you get yourself to the point where you're happy with what you have. It takes a little bit of playing, and how much playing you want to do is up to you, but I'm hoping after this video you sort of get the idea of how you can manipulate that orbit, and not just manipulate the orbit, but also manipulate your position within the orbit so that you can get yourself exactly where it is you want to be. Next episode, we'll be taking a look at our more challenging friend JunkSat 4. But let's take a moment now to quickly go over what we learned in this episode. We started off by taking a look at a lower velocity encounter with the moon, and although we recognize that those encounters are cheaper, we also recognize that they could be a little bit trickier to set up. We then looked at the close approach indicators and realized that they're not just for affecting a rendezvous, but can be used to estimate the position of your target after you complete your orbital insertion. We learned about phase angle, and more importantly, how we can manipulate our phase angle with a target by changing the period of our orbit. And then finally, we took a look at radial burns and how we can use radial burns to change the eccentricity of our orbit without affecting the period of our orbit. And with that, I'm going to draw this episode to a close. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again for the next one.